Welcome to today's Excavation Safety Alliance Town Hall. I'm Karen Strubb, and I'm looking forward to today's discussion, which is utility locate fees, a solution to over-notification or a safety risk, which is sponsored by the Global Excavation Safety Conference. ESA town halls are an open forum to discuss concerns and present potential solutions in order to improve damage prevention and excavation safety. This meeting is meant to be a discussion, and you're all encouraged to ask questions and share your solutions. If you have a question, please type it into the chat box or click the raise hand icon. Give us a few seconds and we'll give you permission to unmute yourself. To unmute, you'll simply click the microphone icon in the top right-hand corner of your screen. Please try to keep your comments brief, as we want to make sure that we have enough time for all to interact. A recording of this town hall will be posted on our website along with a brief blog post and the chat log. If you comment through the chat and you do not want your comment or your name included, please note that with your post. At the conclusion of the call, each of our panelists will highlight a moving forward step to ensure we stay focused on practical and impactful solutions. Today's call will go until 11:30 p.m. or a.m. Central, and I'm pleased to have our panelists who will bring a wealth of experience, and I'm going to allow them to give some background before we begin the conversation. So if you would, please explain what segment of the industry that you work within. And after the introductions, I have a comment we've received to kick off the conversation. So Kirk, if you would start.
I'd be more than happy to. My name is Kirk Blomgren. I'm Vice President of Safety, Quality, Efficiency, and Production here at Petticoat-Schmitt Civil Contractors. We are a utility contractor, and I'm also Chairman of NULCA's National Safety and Education Committee. So that's my interest. So thank you.
Thank you. Brad?
Hi, good morning. Thanks, Karen, for this opportunity. Brad Gowan with OEC, Director of Business Development, and I've been involved in the locate business for, let's just say, a number of years on a number of different levels, but mostly on the contract locating side. So that would be my area for today.
Darcy?
Good morning. I'm Darcy Hurlock. I'm the manager of the Cable Locate Support Center at TELUS Communications. So we're a communication company in Canada with mixed copper and fiber. And I've been in the industry for about 10 years. I'm also a board member of Alberta One Call and the former chair of the Alberta Common Ground Alliance.
Thank you. Ron?
Good morning. Ron Peterson. I'm the executive director of NULCA, which is the utility locators. I'm also the claims avoidance program manager for NULCA. So I represent, I guess, both locators and excavating contractors, and been in the industry about 30 years.
Duane?
Good morning. Duane Rodgers from PelicanCorp. We're a provider of one-call solutions across most of Canada. But we're also run our own one-call systems internationally and have locate companies outside of the US and Canada. So interested in listening to this conversation, understanding it, and hopefully providing some solutions.
Thank you. And Ian?
Good morning, Ian Stables. I'm the manager of damage prevention for ATCO Gas and Pipelines, primarily looking after locate contractors and working with the excavators. And locating is close to my heart because prior to coming to ATCO, I spent a number of years in the field as a locator. So it is something near and dear to me.
Thank you. So as we were letting people know that this was going to be our topic, we did receive a comment that came in. It is from someone who represents an insurance company based in Florida. His comment is, I think discussions of locate fees are red herrings. Fees are not the issue. Documenting change behavior resulting from timely information regarding positive response at the job site is the key to damage prevention. All participants are paying the price of our current system. So keeping that in mind, one thing that I would like to ask of you, Brad, is can you clarify whether the locates are currently free of cost? And if they're not, who is bearing this expense?
Well, thanks, Karen, for that. Yes, I think that's one of the larger issues that we deal with from a perception standpoint. We've always promoted the idea of a free locate, when in fact locates are not free. In most of the jurisdictions that we deal with, locates are no cost to the end user. But locates themselves, there is a cost to that utility owner, whether it's utility or a municipality. and whether they do that with in-house staff or whether they outsource that locate. And I think one of the issues that we deal with in that is that sometimes the perception that a free service is something that can be abused, and I think that's maybe one of the issues that we look at from the locate side of things, from managing that in just dealing with the ever increasing volumes. And I know that that a lot of utilities spend a lot of money on damage prevention for all the right reasons, but by no means are they free, right, Ian?
That is correct, Brad.
Ian, the next thing I have for you is how might shifting the cost of the locate fees from the utilities to the excavators help reduce the issues of late locates and the backlog problems that we seem to be having in our industry?
Well, what we've seen, and kind of what Brad is talking about there, is it just, it's not that we're wanting to shift the fee, but what we're seeing by giving people an option is we're seeing more responsibility with the locates. So when people are having the opportunity to pay for them, schedule locates according to their timelines, we're just seeing a lot more responsibility, less locates, and people, it seems, are more understanding of the whole damage prevention process by including them in part of that process and letting them, pay for them, but more importantly than pay for them, be really involved in the locate process as opposed to our current system, which is just submit a locate request.
Okay. Yeah, I think that's a big piece of it. I know that, Darcy, where you're located, you guys have the dedicated locator program. Can you discuss that and the impacts that you have right now on locate efficiency through that program?
Sure. There's actually, I think, in Canada, very similar to the United States, each jurisdiction, so each province and each state is very different in how it deals with it. And for us, Ontario it's the only province that actually has legislation that really affects telecommunications workers or telecommunications utilities. And part of that is the new dedicated locate program, which was brought in with legislation last year. And under that program, any utility owners that are in a project owner's area and the project owner wants to hire their own locator, the utilities are required to provide mapping support and sign off on the locator, provide their schedule and things like that. So it's bringing a new introduction to that province to excavators hiring their own locators. In some ways, I see it as being very successful so far because notifications are down. The project owner's able to work on their own timeline. They aren't worried about, on some intersections, there's 20 utilities there. They're not waiting for 20 different locators and trying to coordinate all those locates. And did I get this one? Is this one expired before this one's actually done? Right. So the dedicated locator program in Ontario has been very successful. In some other provinces, so British Columbia on the West Coast, for example, has always been, as far as I've been around, has always been that it requires the excavator to hire their own locator. And so, again, each province is a little bit different, but I do see it going this way, and there's so many benefits from a safety perspective and from just a working perspective for the project owner.
Brad, you had something that you'd like to add?
Yeah, so just to feedback on Darcy's comments, what we're finding is the companies that are using that dedicated program, that locator that then becomes part of that crew, and there's a lot of efficiencies gained. There's a lot of benefits from that communication, that ongoing communication. And as Darcy mentioned, the excavator isn't sitting around waiting for a locate or wondering when it's going to be completed. And also, there's an added benefit. We're finding that there's a lot less over notification. So there's a lot of efficiencies gained from that dedicated program. Yes.
And Duane, looking at a little bit of a broader scope, can you share any of your insights from either Australia, New Zealand, UK on the impact of utility locating practices and how they're managing the issues that we're discussing today?
Yes, sorry, I was muted. I guess people know about the rest of world model to some degree, and Darcy mentioned that the BC province is currently working on an excavator-focused locate arrangement. That sort of exists in a lot of other jurisdictions around the world. what's unique in New Zealand, and I have 2 locate companies in New Zealand, is we've had that model where in the one call system, the before you dig system, they call it, you can choose to select at the time you do your ticket whether you want a locate done by the utility or not. And of course, many people do select that, but a lot don't. And why don't they? Because they've chosen to use their own locate team to do that locate on behalf of the utility. That doesn't mean the utility has no impact on that locate. They can also roll their own guys to do that locate. But more interesting, a case study to date is traditionally locators for utility locates have been paid sort of pretty much around a fixed sort of fee. And with our private locating facility in New Zealand, we've recently run a trial with a utility where we're going away from a fixed locate or fixed price locate to an hourly price locate. And the utility is a tier 1 telco is so impressed with the jurisdiction we're doing, they want to rotate away from their current tier 1 provider and come towards an hourly fee to pay for the locates on an hourly basis, because they're seeing the ramifications of that is better locating and actually less damage. So they're now looking to roll that program across the country. So that's quite interesting, because that just shows that we thought there was a need to keep the fees for locating sort of low, and all of a sudden this utility has decided that they're getting a better outcome by paying real world prices, commercial prices for locating and getting better outcomes.
Absolutely. Debbie Klein did mention in the chat that in BC, distribution pipelines must be located by the excavator's landowners, but the large federally regulated transmission pipelines across Canada must be located by the companies. So that's part of damage regulations in Canada, just so we have that in there too. Kirk, as Duane was talking about the fees and getting the better results, can you elaborate on the importance and the scope of training as far as from the safety perspective, which I know is critically important to you?
Oh, sure. Anytime we talk about locates, we have inherent risk. We have inherent risk when if we're going to break the ground, there's inherent risk. You can have a locate, but our locate's 100% accurate all the time. That's not true. No, it's not. But what can we do when we do incident investigations? We ask the 5 whys, or we go through any number of exercises to ascertain what we could have done differently. And a lot of it boils down to education. We can call for our locates, but do you understand what you're looking at? Does the excavator understand? Do our guys understand? I took the opportunity to send some of my folks for a couple of days of training on how to use the devices, not because we have them, because I want everybody to understand what it is that we're doing. I'm actually pretty excited to talk about a program that NULCA is putting into place, because having properly trained individuals is just a key to success. We can't rely on the locator to have everything 100% right. So let's do everything we can to facilitate more accuracy ourselves as well. NULCA is offering a damage prevention train the trainer course that Mr. Peterson will be teaching, and that's great stuff. It's a great benefit to the members. It's stuff like locating for the non-locator. That's a great subject that I think we can all benefit from. The basics of damage prevention. A lot of folks just don't get it or don't understand it. Documentation of a job site, damage investigation. I had 30 years with the railroad, and when I had to do accident investigations, there were a lot of steps. Do we as an industry do a great job of that? Probably not, but educating our folks to understand, document, investigate, and do the preventative steps needed to keep everybody safe. That's just a key for everyone. So that's my 2 cents. Thank you.
Yep. I think part of what I appreciate in what you have to say is for a while when I started in the industry, it was a lot more that they do that and that's their job. And then this group comes in and does this. And what I'm noticing over the years, there's a lot more collaboration of, hey, what should I be looking for to give you a call before I start doing anything? If I see something off, what am I looking for? And then that way you can call before something more even happens. Ron, I know that NULCA, as Kirk mentioned, do you want to talk about the NULCA certifications and how that can contribute to the effectiveness and the safety of the utility locating work and how people can get involved for that training?
Sure, absolutely. And what it technically is, it's a NULCA accreditation. What it does is it validates and rates training programs that allows the people that successfully complete it to then certify their locators. It's kind of a first step. Certification has been tough in the U.S. for locating companies for a variety of reasons. But what the program does, it just makes sure that we are following good standards to train people appropriately. We've had a training standard since 1996, and it's evolved, and it's been used all over the world as the basis for training standards. So, that was our next step. Now let's validate that people are doing it the right way. By doing it the right way and learning, I can teach somebody to turn on the equipment about 5 minutes. I can't teach them to to make the right decisions and how the theory works in 5 minutes. It's a profession. It should be a profession. It's not what it is right now, unfortunately, is it's a job on the way to something better. Once we get a guy trained, he understands the utility industry, he's prime pickings for the utility or for contractors, unfortunately. And we lose those people to better pay. So we have to find a way to make these value-added positions. Along with what Kirk was saying, we need better communication between the two parties. One of the things, going back to Duane and with New Zealand and especially Australia, where I was lucky to spend parts of 2 different years with Duane down there, is what they have is a great level of communication between contractor and locator. They're working together. It's not like it tends to be here in the States, where you're on the fly, spray and pray, run and gun, whatever you want to call it. That dedicated locator is there for that contractor to work with them and work through problems. So really like that. Now, again, how do you incorporate that in the U.S., where we've been doing the same thing since 79 and 50 plus different little fiefdoms that don't want to change? I mean, we can't even get uniform wait times or tolerance zones across the country. So it's a big problem, but it's that's why we're here.
Ian, you have something that you'd like to add?
Yeah, I just wanted to, jump onto something, both Kirk and Ron mentioned, and what we're seeing with the dedicated model where people have used it is the communication that comes as a result from, the dedicated model. It allows the contractors to better understand what the locators are doing, ask the questions on site, and it also lets the locators learn more about what the excavation activity actually is. And one of the things that we've seen where we've been piloting this is, I have not had any damages as a result of the dedicated model, and I contribute that directly to the communication that is happening when you're allowing the locators and the contractors time to actually talk about the work, explain the locates, and learn from each other. And it really boils down to, like at the beginning, more communication. That is really how we prevent damages. And we're seeing the dedicated model is one way to allow for more communication and a better understanding of what both parties are doing. And it's been effective, and it is leading to less damages.
That's great. We do have some things coming in from the chat. So first is from Roy, and it's just understanding how pipes and utilities are laid is a very important part of locator education. And I think going back to the basics, our underground utilities, they're one of the forgotten, luxuries that we have here. And so really going back to how things are set up, why they were set up that way, and making sure that they understand is a very critical piece of this. Now, I don't know if Jim Prozac or Tony Jorgensen are the first 2 that come to mind. If you guys are on the call, please raise your hand. The next question is from Rebecca, and I don't know if any of our panelists will be comfortable speaking. If you are, also raise your hand. But she's mentioning that in Indiana, we have an economic loss doctrine which protects facility owners and locators because the 811 center is the quote-unquote middleman. How are you able to get around the legal departments of the facility owners? Is there anyone that would be on the panel that's comfortable answering that? Otherwise, Rebecca, I'm more than happy to reach out to one of the attorneys that we work with, and we can send that out to everyone. Darcy, yes.
Yeah, sorry. No, I just wanted to, in a couple of different jurisdictions, like again, in Ontario that we deal with the dedicated locator, there's the Ontario one call actually works as a middleman and has standardized documentation that goes out. to all the parties when someone does want to invoke the dedicated locator. That includes legal information. In British Columbia, where, you know, again, it's from our perspective as telecom, it's just industry practice. It's just that the excavator provides it. When we receive a ticket from BC One Call, we automatically send a response back with the mapping information. And we use a couple different software providers to do that, including Pelican with Duane here. And, you know, with that, we include some legal information, and essentially says, you know, as a utility owner, you know, by starting your work, you have accepted this agreement. So, you know, I get it. It's going to be different in every jurisdiction. It's going to be a little bit tricky, but, you know, we have found that it's not as complicated as we think it's going to be, at least in Canada. You know, I think when we started doing this process in Alberta, where I primarily work with Ian, is that we're really worried about a lot of that, and a lot of the like what's going to happen if there is a damage. And we're seeing that, you know, number one, the damage rate is less than half when the locator is working for the excavator as opposed to the utility owner. So that just takes it right away and diminishes the impact of any damages. But number two, resolving a damage in different jurisdictions, like in jurisdictions where the excavator hires the locator, resolving a damage is actually much simpler and requires less time from the utility, from our risk management team, from our legal team and insurance, as opposed to the jurisdiction where we hire the locator and we, you know, hold on to that. Like, this is our locator, this is our jurisdiction. Those claims are so much more difficult and take so much longer to deal with, because, you know, the excavator points at the locator points at the excavator, and now, you know, often it has to go to a judge to sort this out. Where in other jurisdictions, it's like, you did a damage, the mapping's fine, okay, you pay this, and then you figure it out with your locator. So from a legal perspective, again, it hasn't been as complicated as we thought it was going to be.
Okay.
I'm not sure if that really answers the question, but trying to give an insight around that from our perspective.
Sure. And Rebecca, I will reach out to a few people that I have in mind that would be able to address that question, and we will get the responses out to everybody once we have them. So we do have another comment through the chat that came in from Jemmy Wang. He's saying there are two fundamental problems with incentives. One, locates are free to the caller/excavator. Free resources are overconsumed, which is how we get into the over notification. Two, contract locators are paid based on activity, usually per locate, and not based on outcomes. It's a problem with the game and the rules, not the players. The players are doing what is rational given the rules of the game. The rules are the problem. So I do think that it's interesting where he mentioned that it's based on activity and not the outcomes. Is there anybody that would like to speak to this? Brad, I can see you're ready.
No, I agree, and I don't know, that dedicated program it seems to work fairly well and address some of that issue for sure. Again, just having that open communication and dialogue, and the excavator having control of the work of the locator. We've just seen so many benefits on large capital projects using that model for sure.
Okay, thank you very much. Does anybody else have anything they'd like, Duane?
Yeah, I mean, like I said before, I think we've seen not so much we're incentivized via the outcome utility, that we've moved to this, away from this fixed fee where they were using a previous provider, to this, you know, you pay for what you get. You pay an hourly rate. If it's a complex locate, they're paying for it. They've seen the benefits of this massive reduction in damages with the jobs that we're doing. So, you know, the proof is in the pudding. I guess it's hard though for some utilities in the North American space to say, hey, let's rotate away from these $15, $30, whatever, $20 locates to something I'm paying $100 for or $200 for, because, you know, you can see the cost mentality there, that, oh, wow, this is going to explode by 10 times the cost of damage prevention. But on the other side of that, not every case is that way. Not every job is like that. And the ones that are, obviously, are the ones which have the complexity and often end up with the damage anyway. So, you know, this is quite interesting choice for a utility to make, to change away from that fixed pricing.
Ian, I have a question directly for you. What's ATCO's experience with the Calgary Jump Initiative? And if you would explain what the Jump Initiative prior to answering, that would be helpful for the rest of the audience.
I was just going to ask for clarification on the jump, just so I think I know what they're referencing, but I was just going to type in the chat. Can you clarify what jump is? We use a couple different acronyms. I want to make sure we have jump just, and I want to make sure I understand the question. So if you could throw in the chat or raise your hand and let me know what you're specifically asking, I will be happy to answer.
Perfect. I'll watch. Just 1 second.
The joint utility map project, Ian.
That's what I was thinking. Again, we've been doing that in Calgary and Edmonton for a number of years. And, anytime you're sharing the info, it's just beneficial. I mean, we have, when we're excavating, our crews all have access to all the utilities that are in Edmonton and Calgary. And it's a really, really good double check. And again, that's where we're starting to see some of the benefits from the dedicated model is by extension, the locators are sharing that info, not just marking it, but because they have more time on site, they're able to share that with the excavators as well and just get a better picture and understanding. So yeah, our experience from the Jump Initiative in Calgary and we call it Geo Edmonton in Edmonton has just been anything but positive, and it is leading to less damages. And kind of what Kirk said at the beginning, about, it's not just locators are going to make mistakes, but when you have contractors doing the double checks, checking plans, referencing stuff, it just leads to less damages, less delays, and less issues. So it's been a positive initiative in Calgary.
Thank you very much. And Steve, I did enable your camera and your microphone. So if you would join us on camera, you have your hand raised to add something more to the conversation. I want to allow you to do that. Welcome.
No, certainly. No, I just that, anytime you've got access to information, especially from the utility company, from their, their records, if you will, even if you're doing SUE work or if you're doing a locate, it's a great starting point. You know what should be there. You know if you've missed something because it shows on the map, but you're not able to find it, you can do that sweep again and see if you can locate it.
Thank you very much. We have another comment that came in again from Indiana. It says, in Indiana, there is enforcement on gas damages and a fair review of every damage. There is no enforcement on telecommunications. The investigation on damages is performed by the locate contractor with no fair review. The review occurs between the excavator and a subcontracted collection agency. Excavators every day are ghosted by Telcom in response to locate request and the entire process. The dig law does not allow for this, but it is allowed because there is no enforcement help. So there's a couple different things from the one call perspective, from the investigation perspective, from the telecom perspective. Ron, I'll start with you.
Yeah, first off, if you're going to have enforcement, it needs to be uniform and fair enforcement across all parties. I won't get into too much to the who's getting what in the second part. I do agree that a lot of times, the investigations they're biased. Let's face it. But I will say I've seen times when utilities bill both parties and let's see who pays. And if they both pay, great. And that's again, that's a small percentage of people. 90% of all these parties are just doing the right thing. But you need to have fair and uniform enforcement. You need to have impartial investigations. If you do that, bottom line, we need to do more to communicate to prevent them so we don't have to talk about them. But in the other side, it needs to be fair and uniform.
Anyone on the panel have anything that they would like to add to that or other suggestions to help Bruce? The next comment we have is part of the problem would be utilities having proprietary records and not allowing excavator hired locators access. Maybe with a standard certification, maybe a standard certification would alleviate that. I know that the mapping and the records is certainly something that everyone has been struggling with. So Duane, would you like to speak to that? Some of the,
Sure.
the mapping and the possibilities that we have?
Yeah, well, you know, rest of world have been delivering maps for a long time. So whatever how it happens, and Ron mentioned it before, the fact that the locator is usually hired by the excavator, that excavator within minutes of placing his ticket is getting the best maps he can get from that utility. I'm not saying those maps are great. I'm just saying it's the best maps those utilities have. But there's been a real incentive over 20 years to keep improving the mapping data. And I can see in North America right now, there's a real push towards you gathering the data that's occurring every day, gathering that data and then figuring out how to put that back in the hands of the next excavator. Certainly it's projects we're involved in internationally, where Netherlands comes to mind. I like their electronic system. I don't like their model, but their electronic system about gathering the data and using that data and then getting feedback from not just a locator, feedback from the excavator. Can you imagine not only having the locator do his electronic, survey to a certain level, GNSS quality, high quality 1 centimeter or millimeter accurate, and then pass that information on to the excavator. So as he visually uncovers the facility, he can validate what has been picked up by the locator. And then that being passed back to the utility, and then tomorrow, the next guy that goes in a week later or 2 weeks later can actually use that data again. That's the model we have to get to. It's happening rest of world. We have to get here in North America, and there's many different methods and methodologies to doing that. And we're involved in a couple, in Minnesota are looking at some stuff. Michigan recently is now looking at some pilot projects. California North was looking at some pilot projects around this whole idea of how to collect data and then pass it back to utilities. The biggest hassle has been utilities not being able to take the data in a timely process or way and get that data back out. And I was in a conference in New Zealand 2 weeks ago, 300 contractors, and they want to give the data they collect every day in the field back to utilities, and the utilities want to take it, but the process is just not automated. It's not well thought through. So before you dig, New Zealand is going to step in and try and help facilitate that. And I think that's the OneCalls have this great capacity to be that middleman, that clearinghouse, to actually help facilitate moving this data around. And I think that's the next 5 years. That's where we're going, guys. We've got to do that, and that will then alleviate a lot of the problems around this locate stuff, because the excavator's helping the locator. It's a team.
I am involved in the Minnesota project, so it's been something that they've been working on somewhat quietly for the past 3 years. It's really beginning to get some speed behind it, but that was spearheaded by Barb Cederberg, who's the executive director for the Gopher State One Call, our 811 center here, and Steve Swayze, who works with geomapping. But they have a great group together behind them, and everybody has that shared interest of it benefits all of us to have these maps. So their passion is really taking it forward, and they're really seeing some advancements lately. So I'm excited to see what comes next. But Ian, you have some more that you would like to share?
Yeah, I just wanted to speak to Roy's comments in there. He's absolutely right. That's been one of the hurdles as a utility owner, our inability to share our plans and prints easily with locators, especially locators that aren't our direct contractors. So what we've done and starting to do in Alberta is exactly what Roy has put in there. We're working on a training standard for locators. And when they complete that training standard, they'll get a certificate. And part of that process is then we will grant them access to our prints. And, I'm working with Brad and Darcy on that, because we recognize there's a lot of incredible private locators out there, or what we've called private locators, and they're marking our facility without the benefit of our prints. And we found a way through certification to start giving them access to our prints so they can really do double checks and have the data. So I just wanted to say, Roy, you're absolutely correct in your comments. And in Alberta anyway, we are working to address that and ensure that people do have access to our prints.
Ron?
Yeah, agree completely with what I've heard there. The frustrating thing for me, and I think that was back to Roy's thing too, is the proprietary issue of mapping. like, come on, guys, get your maps out there. But the other piece of that, though, is we have the technology now in a multitude of locating devices to improve the mapping as we go. And, it's kind of incumbent on those utilities to get involved with that. Let's improve those maps. Let's get them away from the proprietary issue. And again, it's just another method. I keep saying improving communication, but it's silly that we're not making better gains in the U.S. at improving our mapping system, when just about every manufacturer has the ability to do RTK quality mapping. So we really need to get those guys as part of that equation back into this process.
And Brad.
Just to piggyback again on the comments from Duane, Ron, and Ian. For years, we've been out there as a locating industry, gathering reams of data that would eventually just sit on a shelf somewhere in a paper format, and now it's bits and bytes on a server somewhere. So it's imperative that we have the ability to share that information and work together on making the system better for everybody, and in a user-friendly format that people could read. And that's one thing that we're working with Ian and Darcy with, both here in Ontario and here in Alberta and on Ontario as well. Not sure where I am right now.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was just gonna, add a quick anecdote on that one. And internally for years, I've been battling my security team. They're saying, like, this is critical information. We can't let people know where it is, but also don't let people damage it. So which one is it? Do you want people to know where it is, or do you not want them to know where it is? And I think the other aspect of that is like, well, we can't let people know where it is by sharing our plans. But if they put in a planning request, we'll send you a PDF of it, or you could just put in a giant locate and I'll pay thousands of dollars to locate it in the field for you. So what is going on here? Like, and I think we're getting past that, but I just got an email this morning with the same concern. They're like, this is private information. It's like, but do we want this protected or not? So we got to get past that.
Right. Ian?
I just wanted to add on to Darcy. I being a utility owner, I think, we're changing our thinking. I think the fear for the longest time was by sharing our data, you would encourage or enable people to not get locates, that they would just use the data and go. And I think what we've identified is there's always going to be that segment of excavators that aren't following the rules. So why are we punishing all the others that are playing by the rules, doing the right thing? If we can help them out by giving them more data ahead of it, it's just going to contribute to that safe excavation. The people that are not calling in locates are always going to be there. And I think as a utility owner, we're starting to shift our traditional thinking and trying to find those formats where we can be, more proactive in damage prevention by sharing and engaging with the excavators. But it does take time for utilities sometimes to fully shift their thinking. But we have started to see that progression being made.
Absolutely. There's one comment that came in, and this is from Matthew Cooper. He said, I've heard multiple references to damages being reduced when the excavator pays for the locates. And Darcy stated that damages are 50% less when the locator works for the excavator and not the utility owner. Can links be shared? Links to that data be provided in the chat. And if you don't have them ready enough to share in the chat, if you could share them with me, we do email out all the attendees at the end of the conference. So any of that information I would love to be able to share rather than just having it be part of the conversation. Darcy, do you have some of those stats that you'd be able to send to me?
Yeah, I can share the stats. I mean, we don't have it published or anything in a white paper, not yet. But just to give a perspective, and I know there are people from Canada here, but in British Columbia, where TELUS, we have a significant amount of underground facilities. Our damage rate per ticket is 0.002 damages per locate request. Where in Alberta, next door, where we strictly control the locator and who can do the locates and they only work for us, the damage ratio is 0.005 damages per locate request. So I know those are small numbers overall, but we're talking hundreds of thousands of locate requests every year. So it is a significant sample size in both the provinces. I know excavators work on both sides. They don't care that there's a border there. They work in Alberta, they work in BC, and consistently year over year, we see the damage ratio in BC is half of what it is in Alberta.
When I just had a conversation recently that, there's only so much that you can do if you're having a conversation, and even if you're speaking, in fact, it might come off as opinion. So being able to have the data is really where we're going to have the changes. If once you have the numbers in front of you, it changes the conversation completely. Duane?
Yeah, just a case study, I guess, but finding it hard to get this utility to publicize it, because I think in some ways they're quite embarrassed by the result, in a good way or a bad way. And that is Vector Electricity in Auckland about 8 years ago, on a given day, stopped locating their electricity network. And they'd spent 3 years predicting what was going to happen, and their damages went down. Now, to try and get that case study out of them is pretty difficult. It's like a trust co-op, and they save so much money in not locating and moving the balance and the responsibility of that locate back to the contractors. There was probably a week of issue, and then all the excavators just went, well, we have to do the locates, so let's get on and get the locates done. So they did them. Now, they didn't stop doing everything. They did specific stuff. So that they did the high value stuff, and they did some standovers. So it wasn't a complete turn off, but they literally stopped everything to do with the major distribution stuff, and they had a net reduction in damage. And what they concluded, as we've seen in Michigan recently, as we've seen with, when Western Canada went across to our solution, I think there was some questions raised about how come we're getting less notifications and we're getting less damage. I think, Ian, you might even talk to that. But it was just interesting to see. And I know this is a tough one because legislation in the US specifically doesn't allow for utility to stop doing the locates. So we've got to find a different way of nearly achieving the same thing, because I believe what Ian said right at the start, or someone said, when you give the responsibility back to the excavator, there is better outcomes and there is less damage. Back to you, Em.
Yeah, I just to Matt, we've done a pilot project with dedicated locates last year, and I think I had about 15,000 locates completed using this for me last year. Zero damages, like at all, like no damage as a result of those locates. And as Duane knows, I'm lucky that ATCO, we're in Alberta, we're also in Australia, and their hits because of locate error are a fraction of what I have in Alberta. It is just and it's hard to wrap your head around it at times when you're seeing the stats for the first time. But the dedicated, allowing contractors to be an integral part of that process, giving them accountability and control, has led to significant damage reduction. And Duane, as we've talked in the past, like it is a really, really good model when you allow excavators to control that locate and be a part of it as opposed to just requesting. And I saw somebody throw in the chat, spray and pray. Not far off, because sometimes as an excavator, you really are. You put the locate request in and you wait till you see paint. You're really not involved in the process. And we've just seen tremendous wins when you involve people in the process from start to finish.
We had someone comment, Jemmy had mentioned the two problems that we had with the incentives, and Mike Hicks has also added a third, that the bid process typically leans toward the lowest competent bid, which then contributes to the activity versus outcomes. So another factor to keep in mind. Rose Herman said in Alberta, facility crossing applications, crossing approvals, locates, and construction activities are all siloed and disjointed, causing replication and process gaps. Bringing the monitoring of these activities into one group would streamline the process, please the regulators, and reduce costs. So I don't know, Ian, is that something that's being discussed?
At a high level, yes. I think part of the problem is there's a number of different levels of regulation, right? You have provincial, federal, and it doesn't always align, and it can be, cumbersome to excavators. But I do know at a high level with utility safety partners, we were just talking about yesterday in Alberta, is there a way to make the process easier for the excavator? So while I don't think we're going to have a solution soon, it is something that is being discussed, and it is recognized by industry that anything we can do as utility owners or damage prevention professionals to streamline the process will benefit everyone and lead to less damages. So it is something we're working on, but early stages in the discussion.
Okay. Grant has the comment, when an excavator profits from a dig project, it's important for them to bear the cost of both the public and private locates. By doing so, a financial agreement is established between all parties involved, promoting accountability and reducing the likelihood of damages. I speak from personal experience as the owner of a private locate company since 2004, where damages have been infrequent. When the responsible party covers the expenses for the locates, the contractual document serves to define and enforce rules for all parties involved. So, valid point that he's dealing with it now. Megan Rafinsky, so Georgia 811, said to follow up on the help request that came out from the telecommunications, I think it should be noted that one utility locating can hold up the whole job or the whole ticket, which I think is something that Ian had mentioned initially. When you have 20 utilities that are out there and you have all of these different locators coming, one can stall it. So it may not be all the members on the ticket creating the over notification issues. I am going to go through. We have quite a few comments. I'm going to look for additional questions. Yes.
There's a really good comment made by Roy Rogers about the fact that, you know, the person that suffers at the end of the day usually is the person at the other end of the excavation equipment if they get it wrong.
Yeah.
And so there's this real incentive for those excavators. Most of them want to do it right. They don't want to have their job stopped by hitting something or hurting somebody. And so, you know, giving them this data to help them to double check that the locate's been done correctly, or, hey, we missed that, or, hey, why wasn't this picked up? I think this is where we've got to say they're big responsible boys, most of them. Yes, we've got some cowboys. We're always going to have the cowboys. The cowboys are going to get around everything anyway. But the guys, you know, we're talking about the professionals here. They want this information to help everybody. And, you know, the evidence, I think, is there that we're seeing less damages if you give that data out.
Yeah.
Kirk is the one who's on the other end of the equipment and responsible for all of them. What would you like to add?
Well, I would like to add just a little bit to that. You're right. Having done some of the investigations into utility strikes, some of the stuff's scary. At the end of the day, I want everybody to go home safely to their families. That's the most important thing that we could do, is provide everybody with a safe place to work, good information. And yeah, the guy on that excavator, I want him to go home safely. So I appreciated that comment.
Yeah.
Brad?
Well, I really appreciated what Kirk said earlier about having some of his people train on the locate equipment. Like that's important, that the excavator understands what the locator is up against. But it also goes both ways. And when I've trained locators, I've always stressed the importance of meeting with the excavator and understanding what they're doing. And that can help provide a better product, a better locate, a safer environment for everybody involved. And it's just all about communication. So opportunities like this for those of us from other jurisdictions and different parts of the industry are so important to keep going forward.
Going through the chat again, there's a lot of conversation going back and forth, which makes me happy. As Bill Kygard said, another aspect of sharing utility data is the excavator using today's data in coming years without asking for current data. Bill, if you can expand on that, I'm wondering if you're meaning that as things change, they wouldn't have the current data. I'm assuming that if the excavator would be asking for the maps, they would be getting the most up-to-date information. Otherwise, I don't see the value to it. And then we have a comment that said, another side is, when locating, I've been met on the job site by people who know nothing about the job or locating, and all they want is the paper and to get back to the office. Yeah. So Kirk, I don't know if you've run into that, where if anybody on your crew is behind, or other companies that might be in your area, that if they don't have that vested interest, and I think it all goes back to the education, if they don't understand why they're doing what they're doing, it ends up being just checking a box. It is just a piece of paper rather than someone's life.
We make it a point to hold pre-activity meetings with everybody, including everybody involved, the utility, the locates, we have a pre-activity meeting. Everybody's in place before a shovel hits the ground. And that's the crew, that's the laborer, that's the foreman, that's the superintendent, it's the owner, it's everybody. And yeah, there's no check in the box. We can't do that. And I think our safety record shows that.
Mm-hmm. Ron?
Yeah, and we see it all the time in the locating world that the locator is called in by somebody sitting in an office that's never been to the site, that has no concept of scope other than what they've been told, or I just wrapped up a case in which somebody in the office was calling in an update to a locate request every 4 days. That without changing the scope of the locate to reflect work done. So now you're talking about complete over notification. So the people working these jobs and calling in updates and calling in these tickets, they need to know what's going on. Now, Kirk's group, they're not like that. The vast majority of these guys, as Duane said earlier, aren't the cowboys, but sometimes that lack of knowledge, or it's easier for our secretary just to call these in. We'll just give her a bunch. It kills the process when you actually get to the field. So we need better instructions, less over notification. I mean, that really cripples our systems. And then, from my perspective, our locators need to show up and do their jobs.
Duane, before I go to you, Bill clarified what he was saying, and he was saying that the excavator that's saying the data that they receive on a current project and then using it in future years for that same area, which makes total sense. It's something where the communication is not a one-time thing. It needs to continue. So, Duane, I'll let you make your comment.
Yeah, and to that point, exactly. I mean, this perception that people are going to hoard the data and then just not use the one call system anymore. If you improve the system, or any one of us at the moment could lodge a job in Melbourne, Australia, or anywhere in Australia, and within 15 minutes, every single utility plan. If it's that simple, why would I need to hoard the data? I get the current data every time, and there's no barrier. I'm not waiting 48 hours or 72 hours for some guy to come out and locate with pause response to make sure that it's all working. I've got my plans. I organize with my locate company, and he's out there tomorrow because I'm paying him, and he's getting paid good dollars for this. And that data is just going around the world, and there's good reason for me as a utility to say, you know what, if I make this data more accurate, it's going to get a better outcomes for excavators and my locators out there. So I think that's the same argument around, we can't share data because of homeland security issues. I can tell you the rest of the world have been sharing data, and I have not. And the IRA yet haven't decided to attack England back when they used to, and take out a substation or take out these I think these are fears that we use to sort of defend a position. They're not really really there. They're not really there. You paint the ground. I could take a photograph and use that in 2 years' time. It's no different than storing the data. So we've got to get across these little hurdles and say, we just want more information faster, quicker, and that will make us more efficient.
That's great. And as we look, we're nearing time. So I would like to talk about what a solution or a step someone could take quickly to improve their process. And one of the things that I want to keep in mind is that for some of the people on the call, or even some of the things that Ian, you spoke to and said it's happening higher level, the conversations are happening. I think being able to keep it as what can somebody do in their everyday job to really make sure that they're contributing to this and making things safer. Kirk, I'll start with you. Oh, you're still on mute. There you go.
Well, let's fix that.
Done. Solution.
No, again, I'm going to reiterate that education for everybody is the key. It's the key to what we can. It's the key to moving forward. I think just having folks that are at job sites, having folks, it doesn't matter, both sides of the fence, having folks educated, having folks understand the work, having folks understand, and with great competency as to what it is we're doing. I think that's just key.
Thank you. Brad?
I just like to say that it's communication at all levels. I think if everybody understands what everybody else is up against, there's usually a way to come together and benefit everybody. I know we talk a bit about over notification, and in my experience, I've been on site with excavators, and just working directly with somebody, you understand what they're trying to do, they understand what I need to do, and it really works to help everybody out. But again, that has to work at all levels and coming together on these initiatives.
Thank you. Darcy.
You know what? My final word, I just want to say something a little bit different. The idea that, you know, and the topic was that, you know, our locate's free. But I really want to pivot that thought process instead to, you know, the one call, the 811 process is free. It is really critical that we keep that process, that notification process, as free in my mind. The cost of the locate has to be paid somewhere, and whether it's the utility owner or the excavator, we got to get better at doing that damage prevention. But I really want to keep this idea that the one call 811 process is free, to not drive people away, not scare them off, because we still see a lot of damages, a high percentage of damages where people don't even start in the process. You know, they don't even put in that one call ticket, but that is a free ticket. Even if you're going to use your own locator or whatever you're going to do, at least know who's in the area, at least get a sense of that. So that process, I still want to keep the idea that is free, and then we'll figure out locates after that and try to lead to a better outcome.
Perfect. Ron?
Just as everybody said so far, let's improve the education process for all parties. Let's have uniform enforcement, whether it's for over notification, failure of locators to show up, whatever it is. Let's increase it, and let's improve the mapping processes and get those out publicly so that we have better information and can do a better job all around.
Thank you. Duane?
I back up what everyone said. I think the certification program around locating and elevating locators to be, you know, tested against a standard. You know, we do that also in Australia and New Zealand. We have a certified locator program. We're actually looking to move that up a rank or a step and have a data gathering certification program, so people can actually come in and not just be a locator, someone that's been taught how to gather the data from the field. And that might be a locator, but could be an excavator as well, because we're looking now at the future of how we get and gather the data daily and get it in a way that utilities will accept it. And today, traditionally, utilities only accept the changes to their GIS system if it's done by their own crews, some sort of authorization program there. So we're trying to figure out how to sort of bring in the crowdsourcing of data, and yet at a level that we can understand and manage.
Thank you. Ian?
You know, just echoing from what Brad said, it really does boil down to communication. And what I'd like to encourage everyone on the call to do is get involved, whether it's within your regional ground alliances, meetings like this, because just looking at the chat, see some really positive, great comments. And I think that is what is needed to have, you know, all parts of the industry come together and bringing solutions to the table. That is going to take us to the next level. And, you know, seeing positive solutions being provided, that is going to help us all, and we can learn from each other. So no secret, communication is really how we get problem-free excavation.
One of the things that you guys mentioned that didn't come up in the solutions part that really stood out to me was the cross training, and not just within your own company of understanding, but when you're at the job site and being comfortable enough to say, well, why does that step matter? Or not putting the person in the position to ask, but say, I'm doing this because, and start giving the why for certain things happen, because people tend to be so much more receptive when they understand why that step needs to take place. And then if someone is not doing that step the next time, they may be apt to ask of, don't we need to do this? So I think cross-training among roles that are going to be at the job site would be great. So as we wrap up, I appreciate everybody thoughts, concerns. The chat was great today. But before we share the survey, I do want to genuinely thank everybody for joining us. Today is the last town hall that I'll be moderating as I'll be leaving our company. So I appreciate each and every one of you. Your participation shares the care and concern that you have, and that safe excavation is heading in the right direction. And as somebody who is brand new to the industry, I learned so much from the mentorship and conversations like these. So I'm happy to know that these conversations will continue. Help share the tribal knowledge that you guys have. It's so invaluable. My goal has always been to connect people to facilitate industry advancements and have them happen faster. So please reach out to me or anybody on our team if there's anything that we can do to help. And going back to wrapping up today's event, please take a moment, fill out the brief survey that Levi will put in the chat link. We'll continue to improve these discussions and address topics that are important to you. There is an additional field if you'd like to receive a 23 excavation safety guide. I'll get that sent out to you. A recording of this town hall will be on excavationsafetyalliance.com, where you'll be able to register for future virtual town halls. The next will be in August, on August 13th, and we'll be talking about enforcement, what works and what doesn't. And for the first time ever, the Global Excavation Safety Conference is headed to New Orleans. Louisiana 811 is going to be hosting our event, and conference badges are currently available for only $811 through August 11th. And if you typically join us with a group, now is the time to register or at least get your spots held. You can send in your names later as somebody who used to do registration. That's the easiest way for you to do it. So if you have a topic that you'd like to learn more about or a presentation that you want to share, Levi is going to include in the chat to let you know how to submit an abstract. So to our panelists, thank you again for sharing your expertise. To everyone that joined us, I really appreciate you. To the sponsor of the Global Excavation Safety Conference, thank you for your support. And I look forward to you joining again next month. So thank you for joining and have a great day. Stay
Thanks,
safe.
Karen, for everything.
Thanks,
Karen.
Thank you.
Karen.
Thank
Thanks,
you.
Karen. You're awesome.